Okay. Judgment and Sagarmi Bandhu. So today we are going to continue our book reading of Cosmology, Old and New, written by Professor G.R. Jain. Today we will continue from the same place or from the same text that we have left in our part 5. So this is basically, we are reading this book in different parts. So this is basically part 6. And in our last part, we left it on Akash Dravya, which is basically space. And as we have already seen that in Jainism, there are 6 realities or 6 entities that constitute the reality around us. So Akash, one of those entities. So I shall start from Akash. We now take up the next Dravya Akash according to Acharya Uma Swami. Akashasya Vagaha, the function of space to give place all other substances or interpenetrability is the characteristic of Akash. So as we have already seen that there are Jeev, Ajeev, Dharm, Adharm, and Akash gave space to all of these, or it is combined with all these entities, with all these 4 different entities. Or Jiva Pudgala Dinam Vagahinamavakasha Danam Vagaha Akashasyopakaro Vedi Tavya. That which accommodates souls, matter, time, and media of motion and rest is called the space. The author of Samagraha, Nemichand Siddhanta Chakravarti, describes Akash as follows. Avagas Dana Yogam Jivadiram Vyan Ayasam Jenham Loga Gasam Allo Gaga Samedi Dubiham. According to Jainism, that which allows space to Jiva, etc., is to be known as Akash. The Akash is of 2 kinds, Lokakasa and Alokakasa. The learned author of the 4th Vartika says, Akashantesmin Dravyani Swayam Vakashat Ityakasham Jivadini Dravyani Swe Swe Paryaye Avyatirekena Yasmanna Kashante Prakashante Tadakasham Swayam Chatniya Paryaya Maryadaya Akashat Ityakasham Avakasha Danadava Athava Iteresham Dravyanam Avakash Danadakashamati Prashodaradishu Nipatita Shabda. The same author, Shri Akalanka Dev, has illustrated the accommodating power of space by saying that Akash allows other substance to penetrate itself just as water allows a swan. But this analogy should not be interpreted too strictly. In fact, a swan displaces a certain volume of water, while Akash being a subtle substance, the idea of displacement does not occur there. Okay, we shall read this big citation here. According to a footnote, according to the Hindu theory of creation, Akash is the primordial substance from which the other elements arose, and therefore, as Dr. Thibaut has pointed out, Akash must mean some form of subtle matter and not the mathematician's space. For this reason, Dr. Thibaut has invariably used the word ether to denote Akash, and according to him, this is the only consistent translation. But the Jain thinkers do not believe in the theory of creation, and consequently, they acknowledge a space to be an objective reality, not ether. In the words of Professor H. Chakravarti, quoted from the Philosophical Introduction to Panchastika Sara, curiously, The non-Jain Indian system of thought do not pay any prominent attention to the problem of space. In fact, the more influential Indian system of philosophy, the Vedanta, uses the term Akash indifferently to denote space and ether. It is later meaning which is more prominent. It is to the credit of ancient Jain thinkers that they took a bold attempt to attack the problem, and that with very great success. This fact is perhaps due to their great interest in mathematics. An adequate solution of the problem of space and time is intimately connected with mathematical philosophy. It is modern mathematics that has successfully reclaimed once again space and time from the destructive dialectic of the idealistic metaphysics. Space is indispensable to science and realistic metaphysics. The wonder of modern science are all associated with the reality of space and what is contained therein. Hence, to the Indian realism, space cannot but the real. Okay, so in Jainism, it is different meaning than the other philosophies. In philosophies like Vedic, I guess, they have said that everything emerges from the Akash, but in Jainism, Akash does not, it gives a space to other entities like Jeev, Ajeev, Dharmastika, Dharmastika, but it does not have any, it has nothing to do with originating other real entities. We give below a few more quotations to show that the idea of space in Jainism refers to the mathematicians' real space and not to any such thing as ether. Jivanam pudgalanam cha kalasya dharmayo avagahan hetutvam tadam tadidam pradipadyate nityam vyapakamakash mavagahe kalakshanam characharani bhutani yatra sambha dhamasate lokalokanna bhobhedada kashotra dvidha bhavet avakasha pradha sarva dravyanam murti Exactly the same idea explains the Swetambar Sutra. Avagahana lakkhanenam agastikaye, to accommodate objects is the characteristic of space. The nature and the characteristics of space are very fully described in Panchastika Sara of Swami Shri Kundacharya. They reproduce below the Prakrat Gatha with translation and part of the commentary by Professor Chakravarti. Sabvesim jivanam sesanam tah ya puggalalam cha janded vivar makilam tam loe havad ayasam. What contains or accommodates completely all jivas and pudgala, and the remaining dravyas is the world, space or lokakas. Jiva puggalakaya dhamma ya logadonna tatto annan mannam ayasam anta vidirittam. Life, matter, the principle of motion and that of rest and also time, these are not distinct from the world, but that which is the same as world and also distinct from it is Akash or space, which is finite. Commentary. The constituent elements of the world are the infinite number of jivas and infinite physical objects, the principles of motion and rest in space and time. Of these, space contains other five. The space which is coextensive with these objects is called Lokakasa, but this is only a part of real space. Beyond the Lokakasa is Alokakasa or Anantakasa. This Anantakasa is pure space. There is no objects, animate or inanimate, in this infinite beyond. Not a tiny molecule of matter, nor is a stray jiva would step beyond the limits of Loka. The system of objects is held together by the principles of dharma and dharma, and these principles are confined to Lokakas. Thus, we have to note that mathematically pure space is recognized to be possible by Jain thinkers. Akasa thus accommodates the other dravyas. Why should is not be taken also as condition of motion and rest? The author shows why it cannot be such a condition. So here the question is that, okay, Akash accommodate all other entities, real entities like Jiva, Dharmastika and Adharmastika, but why it is not considered to be in motion or in rest? What are the condition of is there any movement or is there any rest? The author shows why it cannot be such a condition. आगासम अवगासम गम्मर्थेदिकारणे हिंदेति जति उद्धंग दिप्प धारणा सिद्धा चित्तंत किद तथ. If a space, in addition to accommodating other things, conditions their motion and rest, then why do these siddhas, whose tendency is to go upward, come to stay at the summit of the world? Commentary. The author evidently explains why it is necessary to postulate existence of dharma and dharma. Cannot Akash be credited with the function of motion and rest, in addition to its own function of accommodating things? According to the author, such a hypothesis would be impossible. It would be conflicting with the other facts. For if it is also the condition of motion and rest, then wherever there is Akash, there should be free chance for motion and rest. But neither a single jiva nor a single atom of matter could step beyond the limit of lokakasa. Now there is Akash beyond it. Therefore, the author concludes that space is not the condition of either motion or rest. These require independent principle as their condition. Akash cannot be substituted for dharma and adharma. The Jain system evidently considers the world incomplete and unreal without the statical and dynamical principles. In Gatha number 100, the author has emphasized the same point again. Since there is a definite loka, he says, and since there is a space beyond, there must be something besides space which maintains the integrity of the system of things and persons. For space itself cannot have that function of maintaining the unit of the world. In a Gatha of Panchastikaya, we have Jadi Havadi Gamana Hedu Agazam Thana Karanam Tesim Pasjadi Alvahani Logasaya Anta Parivuddhi. If space be the condition of motion and rest of life and matter, then there would happen the disappearance of aloka or the beyond and the destruction and dissipation of loka or the world. As a matter of fact, the world is an integral system of things, living and non-living, existing in space. That there is some force or power which holds the constituent elements of the world together in a necessary presupposition even of modern science. It is really wonderful that Jain thinkers several centuries ago felt the same intellectual necessity of supposing a physical force which maintains the cosmic unity. The reason given for that hypothesis is still more interesting. If there is no such power and if things living and non-living were left in space by themselves without a further principle to hold them together, there would be only chaos, no systematic world. This argument must be considered very important for its use as an insight into the scientific ideas of the ancients. The positive science of ancient Indians must have been fairly advanced in order to promulgate such physical theories as are contemplated by the author. In the next Gatha, the same fact has again been asserted. Tamma, Dhamma, Dhamma, Gamathe, Dikaranani, Nagasam. Dharma and dharma, that is ether and gravitation, are the condition of motion and rest, respectively, and not akash or space. In next Gatha, the author states that Lokakasa or world space dharma and adharma are all coextensive and coincident. Hence, they may be considered as one conventionally, as they are all incorporeal entities in the same locality. but they are in reality different from one another on account of their functional difference. Dhamma, Dhamma Gasa, Apud, Apudbdha, Buddha, Saman Parimana, Ud Gul, Ud Goval, Siddha Visesa, Karant Egat Manmatam. Dharma and space are mutually interpenetrating and coincident. Hence, they are one from the point of locality. They are of the same size and form and constitute an inseparable unit. But from the difference of function, they also exhibit diversity. So here it comes the concept of Anekantavad, or the things that exist or not exist at the same time. So here you can see that dharma is space, because they are mutually interpenetrating. They are the same from the point of view of locality. In this context, yes, they are the same, but at the same time, they have different functions. So with their functioning, with the point of their functioning, they are diverse. So they keep their entity in that, their identity in that sense. So we can understand this in the following analogy. Suppose that you are sitting in a bus. Suppose you are standing at a place and you see a bus moving from left to right in front of you. And you see that your friend is sitting one of the seats, and next to your friend, there is another person. So from your point of view, both are moving, and your friend is not moving from the point of view of the person who is sitting next to your friend. So your friend is moving at the same time, your friend is not moving. It all depends on the context, from the frame of reference, from the point of view. So here it is the peculiarity of Jainism is the Anekantvad, when the reality is multifaceted and the people, and we know only the reality that we perceive. Commentary. This Gatha is interesting for this reason, that Dharma and Adharma, being constitutive elements of the world, are said to be confined to Lokaka. Their influence is not felt beyond the boundary of the world, for their influence is fundamentally related to things material and spiritual. These two mysterious physical principles are all pervading and coextensive with the world space. Their existence cannot be inferred from their difference of locality. Their existence cannot be inferred from their difference of locality. So from the locality, you cannot infer if they exist separately. There is no such difference, but yet they have fundamentally different functions, and on account of these differences, they are really diverse. In short, they are in one Pradesha, but different as Vastus. They have a unity of locality with diversity of function and nature. This functional difference is emphasized by the author only because the three dravyas are amurta. There is no other way of differentiating them, unlike physical objects, which can be distinguished by sense qualities, and unlike jivas, which can be differentiated by conscious qualities. Dharma and adharma have to be determined only by their function in the economy of the physical world. Exactly. Now compare the support of these beautiful gathas with the proclamation of modern science. Just as the Jaina thinkers have divided space into Lokakasa, that is a finite universe, and an infinite void beyond, so is the verdict of the modern mathematician. Strangely enough, the mathematicians reckon that the total amount of matter which exists is limited, and that the total extent of the universe is finite. They do not conceive that there is a limit beyond which no space exists, but that the totality of a space is so curved that a ray of light, after traveling in a direct line for a long enough time, would come back to its straight point. They have even made a preliminary estimate of the time a ray of light would require for a round trip in the totality of curvature, not less than 10 trillions. Oh, Yes, and such a space is very cozy quarters compared with infinity. A mathematician feels positively cramped in it. Again, the same author writes, think of the most remote and abstract of all the theorems of relativity, that the universe is finite. This is quite inconceivable. No astronomer can secure any mental picture of a jumping off boundary beyond which there is no space. When a computation implies that space is finite, the mathematician cannot unmake his brain and visualize finite space. He does not even try to do so, but he presumes that the equation has some concrete meaning and that the meaning may in time take form and be revealed as a serviceable factum, but actual on the border of the known. Mr. Ward may please note that it is not in the least necessary to unmake the brain and visualize finite space. If we slightly modify our present theory and accept the Jain idea of a finite universe and an infinite empty space beyond, in which exists nothing, no soul, no matter, and no media necessary for motion and rest, how very reasonable and easily conceivable it is to suppose that beyond the boundary of the finite universe, the medium of motion, dharma dravya of Jain philosophy, is absent, and thus a ray of light or any other form of energy or even a single particle of matter cannot go beyond Lokakasa. That is, beyond the boundary of the finite universe. Thus, the stability of the universe is established without postulating the idea of curving of space, the latter being a difficult pill to swallow. Einstein, however, has taken up a more correct view, and accordingly, the great relativist Professor Eddington writes, I suppose that everyone has at some time played his imagination with the question, is there an end to space? If space comes to an end, what is beyond the end? On the other hand, the idea that there is no end but space beyond space forever is inconceivable. The idea that there is no end but space beyond space forever is inconceivable. And so the imagination is tossed to and fro in a dilemma. Prior to the relativity theory, the orthodox view was that space is finite. No one can conceive infinite space. We had to be content to admit in the physical world an inconceivable conception, disquieting but not necessarily illogical. Einstein's theory now offers a way out of the dilemma. Is space infinite or does it come to an end? Neither. Space is finite, but it has no end. Finite but unbounded in the usual phrase. The same view was expressed by Professor A.C. Banerjee in a lecture on the expanding universe. According to Einstein's original theory of relativity, dimensions of space are determined by the amount of matter it contains. Space, if there be matter inside, bends round until it closes up. The more matter there is, the smaller space there must be, and space could only be literally infinite extent if it contained no matter at all. So matter is responsible for the curvature of a space dimension. So in Einstein's space containing matter, if one goes right in one direction, one does not get to infinity, but gets back to his starting point again. Closed space differs from an open infinite in the same way that the surface of a sphere differs from the infinite plane. We say that the surface of a sphere is a curved surface and a closed surface enclosing a three-dimensional volume. Similarly, we can say that our three-dimensional space is a curved space and a closed space enclosing a four-dimensional continuum. In Einstein's world, the time dimension is uncurved and so may extend to infinity. It is what is called Einstein's cylindrical world. The last words which we have italicized are worthy of notice. In plain, simple words, they mean that the universe extends in the direction of time, from an infinite past to an infinite future. To be more explicit, there was never a beginning of the universe, nor will it never ever to an end. This fact is the fundamental substratum of Jaina philosophy. It regards the universe with its contents as eternal and uncreated. Jiva Puggalakaya Dhamma Dhamma Taheva Ayasam Athittam Mahiyanyada Anandamaya Anumahanta. Souls, matter, the media of rest and motion, and finally space. These are the entities which are eternal, uncreated, and of immense magnitudes. What greater confirmation we require for the truths enunciated by the Jainacharyas? The cylinder theory of the universe explained in more clear terms by Professor N.R. Sen. He quotes following view of Einstein. Here are some citations. Einstein himself asserts that the universe consisting of large and small masses hanging apparently in finite space is not in fact infinite. One suggestion from his theory is that the universe of 4 dimensions is finite in spatial directions and infinite in the direction of time. It is like a cylinder whose surface is bounded in some direction across the lines which generate the cylinder. This finite dimension corresponds to the 3 spatial dimension of a world of perception, but the cylinder is also infinite in 2 other directions. So is also our universe, which is infinite in the dimension of time, running from the infinite past into the infinite future. There can be no clearer pronouncement than this about the finiteness of the loka. That is universe and its eternity, thus establishing the Jaina viewpoint beyond the shadow of a doubt. It should be noted, however, that while Jaina philosophy regards only a part of loka as finite and infinite space beyond, the Einsteinian view regards the whole loka as finite with nothing beyond it. For, says Eddington, in any case, the physicist does not conceive a space as void. Let us hope that this little difference will disappear as science advances, for as again, in the words of Eddington, as it is inconceivable that there was once a moment with no moment preceding it, so it is inconceivable that there should be no space beyond a certain space. Pudgala. The last substance mentioned in the sutra is Pudgala, which falls within the category of non-living substances. On page 1, we have translated this word as matter and energy, and it is exactly in the sense that the term has been used by the Jaina writers. At this stage, we shall discuss only one phase of Pudgal Dravya. The word Pudgala has the following derivation. Puryanti Galayanti iti Pudgala. Pud means to combine and Gala means to dissociate. Hence, the root meaning of the word Pudgala is that which undergoes modifications by combinations and dissociations. This definition of Pudgala is so full of significance and deep meaning that those who are conversant with the developments in modern atomic physics can fully admire and appreciate the use of the word Pudgala to denote matter. We shall describe in brief how one form of matter is changed into another form by the combinations and dissociation of elementary constituents of matter, electrons and neutrons. The nature of the electrons has already been explained in this book. What neutrons are, we shall explain in the following pages. In the last century, the childish musings of the alchemists were regarded as things definitely of the past. Science had no more use for them. It had triumphed. So it was thought in establishing that elements were unchangeable and indivisible. In the present century, however, the problem which the alchemists set themselves has again been revised. Thou is quite a different form. It will presently be seen that this very miracle of alchemy has been performed in the Cavendish laboratory under Lord Rutherford's direction, and the phenomena of radioactivity elements are seen transforming themselves of their own accord into others. As explained in figure 3 on page 12, all atoms are an assemblage of electrons, protons, and neutrons in different numbers. Uranium, a metal element, is radioactive. Radioactivity has nothing to do with radio broadcasting. It is a technical term which expresses a peculiar property of certain metals. Uranium emits day and night unceasingly three kinds of rays, which are denoted by Greek names alpha, beta, and gamma. Alpha rays are streams of particles, which are the nuclei of helium atoms. Beta rays are streams of electrons, and gamma rays are the rays of nature of light. When an atom of uranium loses 3 alpha particles, it is converted into an atom of radium. The atom of radium is again radioactive, that is, it emits day and night the same 3 kinds of rays. When one atom of radium loses 5 alpha particles, it is converted into metallic lead. This is a confirmation of one part of definition of Pudgala. This shows the dissociative character of Pudgala Dravya, one form of matter changing into another form by the separation of electrons and protons. In the adjoining figure is given the full chain of radioactive changes. So here is the figure that we can see here that chain that a uranium atom is changing into the lead. In confirmation of the above series of changes in uranium metal, it may be mentioned that there exist in the earth crust rocks which are rich in uranium. Radioactive disintegration, that is the breaking up of atoms by the emission of alpha and beta rays, is unceasingly proceeding in these rocks. Geological researchers have shown that the end product, lead metal, is always found embedded in these rocks, together with uranium in a fixed proportion. It is in fact with the help of the uranium-lead ratio that the age of these rocks is estimated, thus establishing beyond doubt that lead is formed by the gradual disintegration of uranium. We shall now give an account of the work which has been done in Cavendish Laboratory of England in order to produce one kind of atom from another kind artificially. So above one was natural. Now here it is an artificial production of one type of atom from another, or one type of nuclei from the another in the laboratory artificially. Figure 5 shows the nucleus, central core of an atom of nitrogen gas, and at the right-hand top corner of the same is shown an alpha particle which has been used as a bullet in the experiment. So here these are the bombardment of alpha particles to the nitrogen nuclei. And what we are seeing here, the above figure shows that an alpha particle bullet from an outside source just on the point of being shot into the interior of the nucleus. What happens after bombardment is shown in figure 6 below. In the words of Professor Enfield, the catastrophe produced by a collision between the nucleus of the atom and the bombarding alpha particle expels a proton from the nucleus of the nitrogen atom. One asks, therefore, what further happens to the bullet which has caused that catastrophe? What becomes the alpha particle after the collision? To this question, two experiments gave its answer a few years ago. The bullet remains embedded in the nucleus at which it was projected. There can be no better example of combinational Furianti character of Pudgala Dravya. The comparison of figure 5 and 6 clearly how the foreign alpha particle has filled an empty place and produced an atom of oxygen from an atom of nitrogen. Thus the definition of Pudgala, Purianti Galayanti iti Pudgala, establishes itself fully. However, we shall give two more illustrated examples before closing the subject. Figure 7 shows the bombardment of the nucleus of lithium atom with a proton bullet. The figure clearly shows that if a proton is added to the nucleus, another alpha particle will be completed, for there are one proton and two neutrons in the free state, and the addition of one more proton will make two protons and two neutrons. That means an alpha particle. This is another example of Purianti, that is filling a gap. At the same time, the lower figure shows that the nucleus bursts and the two alpha particles fly in opposite direction, Galiantry. It shows that in this case, the process of combination and dissociation proceeds side by side, resulting in transformation of a lithium atom into two alpha particles. The case of beryllium metal is interesting, as figure 8, see next page, shows there are two alpha particles and one neutron inside its nucleus. The lower circle of figure 8 shows how the bullet gets embedded in the nucleus and neutron is shot out. Thus, this is again a case of combination and partial dissociation. The resulting atom is an atom of carbon, that is beryllium is converted into carbon by the alpha particle bullet. Experiments have been performed with many more metals, but these examples will suffice. It should be noted that in all these experiments, alpha particles of proton bullets of very high energy were produced by technical methods and then shot into the atom so that the bullets may penetrate the interior of the nucleus and produce the transformations recorded. This discussion leaves no doubt that the selection of the word Pudgala for matter is full of very deep meaning and must have been selected after a profound thinking. It is worthy of note that the use of this word is quite peculiar to Jainism. It does not even exist in the lexicons edited by non-Jaina writers. Okay. A note on Pudgala. In the last few years, an intensive hunt has been going on all over the world for the search of the ultimate particle of matter, the Pudgal, called the quark by the scientists. The hunters are some of the world's leading physicists. The hunting grounds almost anywhere from the high atmosphere to the bottom of the sea to the inside of the latest atom smasher. Despite this painstaking search, it has not been possible so far to track down the quark. According to modern theoretical physicists, the quark is the simplest particle in the universe out of which everything is made. The two most prominent workers in this field are Murray Gell-Mann and Richard Feynman of California Institute of Technology, and their collaborators, Gell-Mann and Feynman, both have won high honors. In 1965, Feynman shared the Nobel Prize for his achievements. From the very start of civilization, philosophers have wanted to find a simple idea that would unite everything we experience in the world around us. So there has always been a search for the building block, like the cell or gene in biology. The burning questions before the theoretical physicists of today are, what are the things really made of? Have we at last to come down to the last foundation stone from which we can build anything, a table, a human being, or a universe? Or must we go on looking at smaller and smaller pieces and going deeper and deeper into the bottomless pit? To answer these questions, very elaborate and expensive experiments were performed in America, as a result of which the number of new particles emerging from nucleus has increased fantastically. By 1962, their number had been counted up to about 100. Some of their names are neutrinos, protons, pions, positive electrons, negative electrons, muons, neutrinos, and their antiparticles, such as antiproton and so on. Millions of photographs were taken, and even those particles were recorded who lived for as small as period as 1/10 billionth of a second, and then died, but the quark remained undiscovered. We congratulate the scientists on their hard perseverance and unceasing labor. So this is the Sutra to Dravyani, and we shall stop here, and we shall continue to read this book as part 7, and we will start in part 7 from Dravyani. Till then, Jai Janain.